In the last segment of Project Steampunk, we drilled rat holes into our goggles, soldered together our power, LED rings, and controller, and uploaded a test sketch to make sure that everything was working. This week we're adding an analog control, finalizing the electronics, and integrating everything into the 3D printed frame. We're going to start by connecting our analog potentiometer to the Arduino. There are 3 pins on our single-turn potentiometer. The outside pins are for voltage and ground. The middle pin returns a variable voltage depending on the position of the wiper, which is connected to the shaft. We're going to use that variable voltage to control what pattern is being displayed on the LEDs. Solder your ground and positive leads to the outside pins. It doesn't matter which one is which. Then solder a single lead to the middle pin. Insulate your solder joints with lengths of heat shrink tubing. Now let's solder those leads to the Arduino. I soldered ground to the remaining G and D through hole, then the positive lead to the 5-volt hole, and the wiper lead to the analog 7. Poke your leads through, then solder to the through hole, not the wire, and clip off any excess wire. If you have it, take a length of 1 1/4 inch heat shrink tubing and wrap your Arduino. You could probably get away without doing this, but I like the extra protection that it affords. Including last week's assembly, you should now have a power source, 2 daisy-chained LED rings, an Arduino, and a potentiometer to control it all. Now, let's go ahead and integrate it with our 3D printed frame. Let's start by adding the LED ring retention plates. These 3D printed parts should hold the LED rings in place, while also cutting down on the amount of light that is reflected back into your eyes. Position them so that the wiring harness is positioned within the cutout, then push them into place. Once they're in properly, you should be able to twist and turn the goggles without movement of the LED rings. Now, let's go ahead and install the potentiometer. It should fit perfectly into the 6mm hole that I designed for the right frame. Push it in all the way, then use the washer and nut to secure it. We could be boring and just install the knob over the top of the shaft, but instead take one of your brass gears and shave away the center hole until it can fit over the shaft of the potentiometer. Once it just barely fits, force it onto the potentiometer shaft, then push the knob over the top. Start to insert the right cup into the right frame. It should fit snugly, with just a little pushing required to complete the docking. While you're installing the frame, gently pull the wire along the side of the cup and make sure it goes between the cup and the frame. Once you've got the right cup inserted into the frame, use a piece of double-sided foam tape to attach the Arduino to the inside of the right frame. If you have any excess wire, use a tie wrap to bunch and manage, or just twist it to control the wiring. Moving to the left cup, we first need to disassemble the magnifying loop. Simply unscrew the nut closest to the clip until it comes off, along with the clip halves and the clip spring. Now choose a brass gear with a small center hole and push the loop mounting pole through the gear, then through the 2mm hole in the left frame. Take the nut you just removed and screw it back into the mounting pole on the other side of the frame. Keep tensioning until the magnifying loops are held in place firmly. Take the battery harness and pass it through the hole at the bottom of the battery retention plate. Then, again gently holding the wires against the side of the cup, slip the left cup into the left frame. Once the cup is firmly attached to the frame, and if you've loaded the program from last week's episode, you should be able to put a battery into the power compartment, connect it to the power harness, and enjoy some senseless LED action. So because the electronics haven't really changed between version 1 and version 2, other than us getting a little tricky with how they're actually installed, that's still a very good tutorial for you to actually do the final assembly.
Right.
If you could handle me the snips really quickly.
Snips.
Let me show you what we've done here. So on my Arduino, I've got the potentiometer now connected. And what that's going to allow us to do is to snip back the wires that I soldered in here. And like so, and like so. So that when we install this, there's not going to be a bunch of sharp edges on the bottom. Now, this means my control circuit is now complete. So I will have the ability to change the animation pattern based on what the position of my potentiometer is. Nice. I still have not connected the LED rings, but that's because I haven't put them into the case just yet. Yeah.
And once you're finished soldering everything to the Arduino, are you going to heat shrink it? Put like a giant thing on?
I did that in the version 1 because it was just double-sided taped to the side of the housing. But in this particular case, I've got these the little carts, and so it's going to be hot glued into the cart. Where's the like this? So this is how it's going to look. This is actually going to go inside this, and this almost snaps in. I'm going to use a tiny bit of hot glue in the bottom, And then this entire cartridge can just be slid in and out. In my prototype version, I actually put bullets, little 3mm, actually the 2mm bullets, the same ones that we use for the quadcopter projects, inside of here so that I can actually disconnect from the potentiometer so that I didn't have to be dragging the frame around.
That makes sense,
But that just adds more level. Yeah, for most people who are never going to disassemble their goggles after they've put them together, it doesn't make sense to do that.
And you can still have access to the USB, right? So if you want to update the code.
Well, see, look, and that's the nice thing about this. The USB port's right there. So I don't even have to take this cartridge out. If all I want to do is reprogram it, I can just plug in here and I'm good to go. But if I want to actually change the functionality, I can remove the card entirely and just replace it with a new one.
Cool.